Star Trek Online has a new Prodigy ship coming to the game. This time it's the new Dauntless. Here it is, Star Trek Prodigy's Dauntless class, or what Star Trek Online is calling the Dauntless II, seeing as Star Trek Online has the original Dauntless as well. In Star Trek Online, this is going to be a command science dreadnought, which is an interesting choice if you ask me, though honestly I don't know what else I would have made it. Obviously a science vessel makes sense for this thing, and the fact that this is a science dreadnought makes me wonder how big this thing is going to be, because I remember the original Dauntless, it's rather small, so I'm guessing this is going to be noticeably larger than the original Dauntless, which means, one, it's probably not going to be interchangeable with parts of the original Dauntless, so it's probably not going to have any customizable options with the original. In Star Trek Online, this is going to be a command science dreadnought, which is an interesting choice in my opinion. Command, seems obvious given that this was commanded by Admiral Janeway in Star Trek Prodigy, and a science vessel is obvious because the original Dauntless was also a science vessel. But this is a science dreadnought, which seems odd to me because, I didn't think the Dauntless was that big. This Dauntless, the original Dauntless, that's actually a pretty small ship. And it's safe to assume that this one's a little bit bigger, but I didn't think it was that much bigger. I know it's pretty large in comparison to the Protostar, but the Protostar is a very small ship. Before we get into the stats, first off, let's rip off this band-aid. This is going to be going into the Infinity lockboxes. It'll be live on October 12th. Yes, more stuff from the Star Trek Kids show going into the Gamble boxes. It's a really great look, Cryptic. Anyway, let's get a look at the stats of this thing. Like I said, this is going to be a command science dreadnought. It's also going to have, this is a miracle worker seat. I'm guessing this part of the text is left over from the Protostar blog because this says, what does it say? It says temporal miracle worker, but it is actually a command temporal. So we can ignore this bit a little bit over here. Anyway, let's get down to the actual stats. It's got a hull modifier of 1.2, a shield modifier of 1.6. That is a very high shield modifier. If only that mattered something, because honestly, shields, I know they've come a long way in recent years with all the stuff that they've added to shields, but honestly, on a science vessel, it really doesn't matter. Maybe I'm being too harsh there. I know science tanks have been making some inroads in terms of builds these days. Maybe it could be more useful than I think it is, but it doesn't catch my attention. It's just shields are shields. I really don't care. It has a 4-3 weapons layout, which is pretty typical of a science dreadnought. 3 device slots, and in the bridge officer seating, it has a commander level science / command seat, a lieutenant commander engineering / temporal seat, a lieutenant commander tactical seat, an ensign level universal, and a lieutenant level universal. The seating isn't really that bad. The command stuff will make it useful for either tanking or for torpedo builds, which, torpedoes and EPG builds go really nicely together. EPG is exotic particle generator. That's usually the sciencey space magic stuff, which is the kind of stuff you usually want to do on a science vessel. And that's going to be complemented even better with this temporal seating, because temporal goes really well with science builds because a lot of that stuff is physical damage, which is an exotic form of damage, which can be buffed by all your EPG stuff. So this will be a nice side torp build or even just a normal torpedo build. In the consoles, it's got 4 tactical, 2 engineering, and 5 science. It has a base turn rate of 7, an impulse modifier of 0.16, an inertia rating of 35. So this is going to feel like a bit of a chunky ship, which makes sense because it is a dreadnought, and it also kind of lends to the fact that this is probably going to be a larger ship than I think it's going to be. Because honestly, I'm still thinking Dauntless. It should be a small ship, but I guess Dauntless 2 is going to be larger. Or maybe it'll just be a small dreadnought. Honestly, I really can't say at this point. In the power bonuses, it's got +5 to shield power and +15 to aux power. Don't care about that shield power, but the aux power is going to be nice. It can equip dual cannons, which uncommon on fed ships, but this is a dreadnought, so that works. It's got a new console. It does have a hangar bay on it because, again, it's a dreadnought, and it'll have Delta flyers equipped in it, which is a little unconventional, but it's on brand because this is, Voyager adjacent. Now, if only the Delta flyer pets didn't suck. Yes, I know they have tachyon beam, but their damage output is still criminally low, and being that kind of mid-range hangar pet between fighter and frigate, they're like those heavy shuttle type things like the runabouts, their cooldown is very slow, and you only get 2 of them per launch instead of 3 of them like you would fighters. Honestly, these mid-range shuttle pets, they need a complete rework, because they've always been seriously underpowered compared to the fighter and frigate counterparts. Anyway, it'll have a secondary deflector slot because, again, Science Dreadnought, sensor analysis, subsystem targeting that no one will ever use because those abilities are all terrible and they share cooldowns with your normal energy weapon firing modes. Seriously, these abilities are terrible and they should just go away. The Dauntless II will also have the hyper-advanced quantum slipstream drive that the original Dauntless had, which means, for comparison, that means that will give you a maximum warp factor of warp 22 and a flight speed turn rate of 3 compared to the warp 20 that standard slipstream gives, with a flight speed turn rate of 1.5. So it's not going to be the best. It's not going to be the best slipstream in the game, especially compared to like Protostar's proto warp ability, which is just miles ahead of everything these days. But yeah, it'll be a bit of a buff compared to standard slipstream. It'll also have the inspiration abilities because it's a command ship, and it will have the standard science vessel mastery package because there's just no variety in the mastery packages for science ships. So that's going to be buffs for exotic damage, shield HP, healing, and shield regeneration and hardness, that first one being the only one that matters. The console on this ship is called the JDMA Launch Cells, and this is an interesting one that I'm actually really curious about. So the description is activating the Joint Directed Munitions Attack, which that's the acronym. This console releases a wave of simplified torpedoes with warheads armed with admixtures of exotic particles too unstable for long-term storage. They arc towards the target, overwhelm their defenses with a large number of smaller impacts that more effectively delve force into the foe's hull. The kinetic damage dealt by this attack is modified by auxiliary power and either projectile weapon skill or exotic particle generation skill, whichever one is greater. It counts as both an exotic and a projectile attack. This sounds really nice, actually, because kinetic and exotic damage blend really well together because, well, for one, with torpedo builds, you don't need any power in your weapon system, so you can dump all that into either engines or auxiliary. So you really kind of want to max out both of those as much as you can. So you're already going to have a lot in those, so that means you're already going to be buffing this console, which is nice, depending on how much damage this ends up doing. Well, you know, of course, as usual, they don't give any solid numbers, and we haven't gotten a 10-4 weekly yet. But I love the synergy here. I really like the way this console sounds like it's going to perform. I'm looking forward to seeing it in action. Just really wish it wasn't on a lockbox ship because I'd love to be able to get it, but I cannot afford a lockbox ship right now, mostly because I just bought the Texas because I wanted its console for a theme build. And funny enough, this console would also go really well on that theme build because it's basically what I'm doing is a all torpedo build on the legendary Akira. I am trying to fit as many torpedoes as possible onto the ship, be it weapons, starship traits, or consoles. And yeah, this would actually be a great addition to it, but I cannot afford a lockbox ship right now. Oh, and in addition to that, the passive abilities on this console give buffs to maximum auxiliary power, projectile weapons training, and exotic particle generations. So again, really nice passives on this thing because it buffs all the stuff that also buffs this console's attack. So yeah, really nice synergy all around here. Really promising sounding console. I look forward to seeing how well it does. Starship trait for the Dauntless II is called Vanguard Shield Shaping, and while this is slotted, activating a Bridge Officer Torpedo Firing Mode or an exotic damage ability grants bonus kinetic damage and forward shield facing. You guys already know how I feel about shields, but the bonus kinetic damage could be nice. Again, some actual numbers would be nice to see, so, you know, because it kind of determines how well this trait is going to be performing. So I guess that could be nice, or it could be crap. Who knows? I wouldn't say it's going to be crap, because, I mean, a damage buff is still a damage buff, but I'm guessing this isn't going to be breaking the torpedo meta anytime soon. Now, the second part of the description, this is just confusing to me. Torpedoes passing through the region receive knock-on benefits as the excess shield energy is shunted into their warheads. This is very bad for the longevity of the warheads, but since the torpedoes fired in combat tend to not spend much time in storage, the trade-off is acceptable. So it sounds like the torpedo damage is going to scale with the strength of your forward shield, which in that case, I'm even less thrilled about this trait because we all know how easy it is for the Borg to eat through your shields with their tachyon beams. Again, we'll see how it does, but tying shields into your weapon damage, I'm not thrilled about it. Anyway, overall, the Dauntless II Command Science Dreadnought. It sounds like a decent ship. Like I said, I like the seating, I like the overall stats of it. I mean, it's not going to be the most amazing science ship in the game, but it'll be pretty decent for a torpedo-heavy EPG build or just a straight-up torpedo build. if you're looking for something more torpedo focused, I mean, there are a number of cruisers and escorts that'll do better than this thing at that, because torpedo builds at their core are very weapons focused, and you're going to want like a cruiser or an escort for that. But this could still do pretty well at those as well. As a pure science ship running an EPG build, again, it'll do pretty well, but there are other ships that fit that role better, like the Cheval or the Verne, because temporal is really optimal for those sort of builds. And having this be, and while this does have a temporal seat, it is also a command primary, which means it's going to have the inspiration mechanic, which isn't bad, but at the same time, you're also going to be missing out on stuff like recursive shearing 3, which, you know, when used correctly, can hit like a truck. Like I said, the trait, it could be interesting, but honestly, from the sound of it, it's kind of meh in my opinion, especially in comparison to other traits in the torpedo meta, or even in the EPG meta. But the console, this is definitely the most interesting part about this thing. It really is just my luck that I'm just about finished with that all torpedo build, and then they released this. God, timing, it's always terrible. As usual in these situations, really the only downside is that it is a lockbox ship. This is going to be introduced into the Infinity lockboxes. It'll be going live on PC on October 12th. Console, I don't know when you'll be getting it. We don't have a date here, but you can assume it'll be in a month or two. So yeah, that is the Dauntless II. Like I said, it's a decent ship for either torpedo builds or EPG builds, but honestly, there are better ships that are more optimal for either role. The trait is kind of, we'll see, but I'm not going to hold my breath on how well that one's going to do. But the console, that does show some real promise. And honestly, I do want the ship just for the sake of the console, but it'll probably be a long while before I actually manage to get it, because I really hate buying lockbox ships just for the sake of their consoles or traits, and I literally just did that because I bought the Texas for its console for my all torpedo build that I'm putting together, and yeah, the timing is really great on that. I am really disappointed that this ship ended up in the Infinity lockboxes, but of course not at all surprised either. I'm disappointed because this is the Dauntless from Prodigy, and Prodigy is the kids show, and I went over this all in the at the end of the Protostar video. It feels morally questionable to be putting content from the Star Trek kids show into the gamble mechanic of the game. But they did it with the Protostar, so of course they were going to do it with the Dauntless II. And honestly, I'm surprised the Dauntless II didn't end up being an R&D promo ship. Not that it makes much of a difference. One is ridiculously expensive and one is a bit more ridiculously expensive. So either way, it's a lot of money. But yeah, I guess it's, I was about to call it a silver lining. It's not really a silver lining. It's just the difference of like 300 million EC. Anyway, let me know what you guys think of the Dauntless 2 down below in the comments. And while you're down there, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. If you would like to further support the channel, you can hit that join button to become a member, or you can hit the super thanks button, or you can find the link to the merch store in the video's description. If you're ever shopping on the Epic Game Store, be sure to use my content creator code STU1701 while you're checking out. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does help me out and I do appreciate it. That is Epic creator code STU1701. Either way, thank you so much for watching. My name's Stu, and I will see you guys next time. Excuse me.